All right, well, everybody welcome. Good morning. It is still morning, isn't it? Yes, thank you. I'm Randy Grissom. I'm the interim president of Santa Fe Community College, and I want to welcome you to this policy track. We do have a couple of changes to the panel. Representative Brian Egolf and PRC Commissioner Valerie Espinosa are not going to be here today, but we do have three people who are here today, and what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce each of them, then I'm going to ask some questions, allow each of them to provide some answers, and then towards the end we'll just open the floor to questions from the audience. But on the panel today we have Gerard Ortiz, who's the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs for the Public Service Company of New Mexico. Next to him we have Doug Howe, who's a former PRC Commissioner, and then we have Randy Sadewick, who's the President of Positive Energy Solar. So before we go to the first question, I'd like to ask each of the panel members just to say a little bit about who you are and why you're here. So Gerard, you want to start?
Sure. As Randy mentioned, my name is Gerard Ortiz. I'm the Vice President for Regulatory Affairs with PNM. I grew up in Santa Fe. I have a large family here in Santa Fe. And I'm an electrical engineer. I started out in engineering. I've been in the utility business for 33 years now. And over the 33 years, I have seen a dramatic change in our industry in terms of the resource mix, in terms of what is viable, and in terms of where we're going. And over the last several years, I've been actively involved in regulatory. And I guess what I would say we're finding is my job is all about balance. Whether you're talking about rate design and how costs get divided among rate classes, or whether you're talking about resource mix and renewables or shutting down coal units, it's all about balance. And so I'm really looking forward to being here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Great. Doug?
Good afternoon, good morning, wherever we're at this point. Let me just offer a disclaimer right up front. I'm the last minute plug-in here and got told right outside the door you're on. So if I sound unprepared, it's because I am. My name is Doug Howe. I'm formerly a PRC commissioner. I stepped off the commission at the end of 2012. It was an interesting experience, to say the least. You know, when you're one of five people, you really got to work to find consensus. And look, I'm going to tell you, one of the challenges is finding consensus on that particular PRC commission. So, you know, when we get more into the discussion about, you know, what are the challenges and what are the benefits here, I'm probably going to bring some of that focus to you. My personal history, I've been in this business for 30 years. By this business, I mean the energy business. I've been in this for about 30, actually it's a little bit more now, years. I've worked on the utility side of the equation. I've had a job very similar to Gerard's job for another utility back east. I've also worked on the regulatory side, and I've worked on the environmental side. So I've been fortunate to kind of see it from most angles. And thank you, Randy, for asking me to sit in. I look forward to this.
Doug couldn't turn down the chance to represent both a PRC commissioner and a state legislator, so he's doing both today. Randy, how about you?
Okay. Yeah, is it good morning? Yeah, still. Good morning. My name's Randy Sadewick. So there's two Randys on this. I am a co-owner of Positive Energy. It's been in business about 17 years. And I got my solar system on my roof about 2006, and it's a 1.19 kilowatt system that supplied about 150% of my energy needs for most of the time until like last year when I got a freezer. Now it's about even. And I have a solar hot water that supplies 99.9% of all of our hot water usage. My wife and I are energy freaks. I spent about 3 years of my life in Japan and was awakened to an energy efficiency culture by design that really had energy literacy built into the economic system. And I'm also involved with a group of men called the Mankind Project. And the Mankind Project is about men serving in the role in society with integrity and accountability. And so this is an important part of my journey, is not just the solar side of it, but just as a human being on this planet. So I'm constantly struggling with that inside, and that'll be it. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks. So I'm going to ask, I've got about 4 questions that I'm going to ask and get a response from each of the panel members, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. The first question kind of has 2 parts to it. How do you view current trends in energy efficiency and renewable technology in New Mexico, and are we going in the right direction? Gerard, you want to start?
Sure. I view these trends as being very positive for PNM, for our company, and also for our customers. One of the trends that has really benefited customers and PNM, frankly, has been the declining cost of some renewables, such as solar energy. And that decline has manifested itself both on the customer side of the meter and also on PNM's system. If you look at PNM's investments, by the end of this year, PNM will have installed nearly 70 megawatts of utility-owned solar on our system. We will have invested more than $200 million over the last 4 years on solar facilities. That is a big investment. Now, in addition, we also have 3,800 customers from whom we are purchasing RECs. And as of the end of last year, we had 31 megawatts of customer installed solar. So we have seen a lot more solar on our system. PNM has invested in a pretty big way in solar energy. I'm sure that most of you are aware that PNM has a proposal before the Commission now to shut down units 2 and 3 at San Juan. And as part of our resource modeling, when we have put together, through our modeling, we identify the most cost-effective resource portfolio to serve our customers over the next 20 years. And I was very pleased to see that 40 megawatts of solar came through as part of the most cost-effective portfolio with a target in service date of 2016. Now, in terms of energy efficiency, I'm sure you're all aware of the Efficient Use of Energy Act. PNM was the first utility that out of the box filed an application for utility energy efficiency programs at the Commission. We've invested a lot of money. We're on track to achieve the 5% savings in 2014. We'll save cumulative 411 gigawatt hours of energy this year. So I think that we have that there are a lot of trends that are helping us rebalance our portfolio. It's providing customers with choice. It's helping us to use energy more efficiently, and that's an objective that we all share.
Thank you. Doug?
Well, again, forgive my lack of preparedness. I haven't prepared these remarks, so I might ramble just a little bit here. Let me divide my remarks, though, up into trends about the technology versus trends in the regulatory and legislative arena. Let me talk a little bit about the technology first. As Gerard pointed out, the declining costs, I think, show that economies of scale and the technology learning curve are real. I mean, it really does matter. I was particularly excited to see a recent announcement by Austin Energy, which is the city-owned utility supplying electricity to Austin and surroundings, Austin, Texas. I was particularly excited to see their announcement recently of a 50 megawatt solar purchase it was a 100 megawatt solar purchase at $50 a megawatt hour, which is a pretty astounding number. And that $50 a megawatt hour doesn't include any state tax incentives, any state production or investment tax credits. As you might know, here in New Mexico, maybe you can remind me of the name, what is the name of the large PV installation down in the south?
Macho Springs?
Macho Springs, thank you. I knew you'd remember it. The Macho Springs 50 megawatt solar installation was announced in southern New Mexico. Will be selling its output to El Paso Electric, and it achieved a price, I think, of $59.70, which was at the time the lowest announced price for solar in the United States. It had some help from the state of New Mexico in terms of the solar production tax credit. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get around to the challenges. In Texas, the 50 megawatts being bought by the city of Austin does not have that credit on it, which I think shows that we are getting real, not just subsidized prices, down to a level where they are absolutely competitive with conventional resources. So that's a pretty exciting trend. When I look at the legislative and regulatory trend, I see confusion right now. I think there's some instability in the system, both nationally and at a state level. The recent back and forth on the renewable energy rule here in New Mexico, I think, is emblematic of the what I would call a pretty unstable state of affairs for renewable energy. And maybe that's settled down now, and it's going to stay this way for a while. When I look at the national level, I don't see much action at all going on, and I don't see the possibility of a lot of action going on given the partisan politics that we find ourselves in right now. You may have also seen that there is a political program started by the Americans for Progress, I think, to basically get the renewable portfolio standards repealed in all of the 34 or so states that have them. They've not been successful yet, but there's a lot of money that's flowing into those efforts to get those repealed. So I see some confusion, I see some instability in the political and political landscape for this. My hope is that the costs are going to decline fast enough that economics are going to make the argument at the end of the day, and it's not going to be a political argument.
Thank you. Randy?
I want to start and break this out into energy efficiency and renewable energy in New Mexico. I can't speak for the programs that PNM is offering. Gerard mentioned that already. But we visit a lot of homes, thousands of homes, and I've been in hundreds of homes. And I would have to unfortunately say that the energy literacy of our average homeowner or typical homeowner is very low, and it's not a the energy literacy has to do with being able to make changes in your home, make investments so that you can have higher efficiency, turning the plug loads off and so on. And so the only way to get around that is to design the system to make that work so that people don't have to go to a store and figure out which one's the most efficient and how to do that. So in general, I'd say because of the low energy literacy, it's difficult for us to go into a customer and say, you know what, you could reduce your bill by 20%. And it would probably cost you about, $25, $30 a month. Buy some power strips, and you'd have to turn off your TV with a power strip, and you'd have to unplug your direct TV thing. So that's a real challenge. It's an uphill battle, and I don't know how successful it is. I see the PNM thing about energy efficiency every single time, and I read every one of those. But it's just, why are we so ignorant about that, and why don't we do something? Why don't we do the obvious right thing? So that's really frustrating, and it seems like I'd say that the trend there is not good. I'd say that the trend is unacceptable. That I've read that we could see upward of 30 to 50% reduction in energy efficiency if we just put some effort into it. I know our building is just an absolute disaster because there's no energy efficiency codes for commercial buildings. So it's really frustrating to live in this kind of an environment after I've spent 3 years in Japan where, everything was set up. You don't have to go shopping and find the right appliance. So all I can say that education is really the biggest challenge, and I think that this is the only way that the school system perhaps could do this. Because solar energy efficiency isn't sexy. It's almost impossible to make money. You've got to have some kind of funded third party that's funded by the federal government or the state to do energy efficiency, especially for low-income housing projects. And I have seen lots of different working models that say that if like we have a LEAP program, you have a LEAP program, right, Gerard, that funds low-income homeowners who can't pay their bill. And so one of the other states has a program that says, okay, if you can't pay your bill after 2 times, you have to have an energy audit by us, and we're going to fix your problems permanently. So this is the kind of thing that has to happen in order to make a serious dent in energy efficiency, and we are not there. And I'm going to continue to be frustrated by that. And so this is the only chance I've ever had to share that with you. So I feel better. Renewable energy, I mentioned in a previous presentation that I, back in 2004, when I joined Positive Energy, I had predicted that we'd have 12 employees and we'd be about $2 million. And I was off by a factor of 2. The market grew twice as fast, and it was beyond my wildest dreams. And so my dreams weren't wild enough. I think that that being said, I think right now in our market we're coasting. The incentive of the 20% target by 2020 is a target, and P&M is earnestly trying to meet that target, and El Paso Electric is saying, no, we can't meet it. It costs too much. We're backing out. So that begs the whole question. If you look at rate increases over the course of the last 10 years, U.S., even locally, the rates have gone up more than 3% for just the fossil fuel cost mostly, maybe some other costs, which means that right now P&M is limited to spending 3% for renewable energy. Yet the rates for fossil fuels have been going up 5-6%. So does that make sense that we should cap and limit the renewable energy to 3% when we're being bombarded by increasing costs of fossil fuels? So I guess I feel like now that I've learned more about this and I see that the potential for uptake is so great, I feel like we're constrained. We're constrained by a system that was originally adopted, and it made sense at the time, and it was a good policy, but now it needs to be expanded. It needs to be beyond 3%, which means that we ratepayers would pay a little bit more than 3% for renewable energy, for a clean environment, for healthy people, and for jobs. Seems like a good trade-off to me.
Thank you.
Wait a minute. Sorry.
Look at his notes.
I think that the last thing I wanted to say is that the 20% by 2020, I mentioned this earlier in the talk, is kind of like a couple getting together and saying, hey, let's have a baby and let's plan, everything for the first 2 months. And that's it. To me, setting a goal of 20% and not having the ultimate goal in front of us, which is 100%, is it's just a milestone. It's a step. We need an energy policy that goes to 100% for many, 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 many reasons. And so 20% means right now that the REC program contracts expire around that time frame, and there's no certainty beyond that. Where if we had a policy where we had a target beyond 2020, 2030, and 2050 to 100%, there would be more meaningful thought going into the structure and so on of this program. So those are the main points. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Randy. So I want to kind of combine the next two questions, but also allow each of you to comment on the others' viewpoints on this. But as you're commenting on comments that the other panel members make, talk a little bit about the trends, what are the benefits that we're seeing, and what are the challenges that we're seeing. And Doug, I'm going to start with you. You talked about the challenges a little bit.
Okay. Well, benefits and challenges of these things. I mean, let me address very quickly just the benefits, because I think some of them are pretty obvious. And the reason you're in this room probably is because you're passionate believers in the benefits of renewable energy and energy efficiency. To me, energy efficiency is just a no-brainer, and I get a little bit frustrated when I hear legislators, politicians of various different stripes and whatnot say, yeah, but every time I open up my utility bill, I see a little line on there that says energy efficiency rider, and it's adding to the cost of electricity. How can you tell me it's not adding to the cost of electricity? And the problem there is, the challenge is trying to explain to the average person, and this gets to Randy's point about energy literacy, trying to explain to the average person the difference between long-term costs and short-term costs. Yes, in the short term, you're paying an extra amount for energy efficiency. In the long term, the only reason you're doing this is to avoid an additional increment of capacity, but you might not see that savings for some time to come. So, that's a difficult soundbite for people to get. So that's a benefit and a challenge. On the renewable energy side, obviously the things that Randy said, health, environment, all of these things matter and are one of the main reasons, maybe the main reason, that we have taken up a renewable portfolio standard along with 34 other states. What we're also getting from that, though, is jobs. And sometimes the jobs card is a little bit overplayed by both sides. But I think what an analysis shows, and in fact I did write an op-ed about this about 2 months ago, what the data shows is that Colorado and New Mexico lead the United States in creation of what's called green goods and services jobs. In other words, their percentage of job creation in those areas are the highest among all states, even California, which I think, as most of you probably know, is the front runner in terms of its commitment to renewable energy and energy efficiency. Now, the pure number of jobs in New Mexico is not huge because New Mexico is not a huge state. It's not California. But it is one of the only areas in New Mexico that is actually growing jobs. Many of you may know that New Mexico is number 50 in the nation when it comes to overall job growth. We are growing jobs more slowly than absolutely every other state. And number 49 isn't even close to us. So it's a big, big, big gap between 49 and 50. One of the bright areas is renewable energy. Let me talk now a little bit about the challenges, because there are many out there, not just regulatory and political that I discussed earlier. But let me take energy efficiency as an example. I had an opportunity a number of years ago when I was leading a consulting practice to do a study in the European Union, to lead up a study in the European Union about their energy efficiency goal of 20% savings of primary energy just from energy efficiency by the year 2020. The study was commissioned to find out whether this was actually possible in the European Union. Candidly, what the study found was that it's hard. It's not going to be easy to get to 20% savings just from energy efficiency. But the thing it pointed out, and this is true in the United States also, the big area of opportunity for energy efficiency, and it's a benefit and a challenge at the same time, is our building stock, and particularly our existing building stock. Lighting has been done. I mean, ask Gerard. Lighting has been done. I mean, if there's an incandescent bulb left in the state anymore, you'd be lucky to find it. And by the way, go into Lowe's and look for an incandescent bulb. All you'll see is empty spaces on the shelves because they're not putting them there anymore. Lighting has been done. Insulation has been done. But our existing building stock tends to be old. It was built to old codes that did not really care that much about energy efficiency, building envelope. New buildings are being built to better standards, but we still have all of this stock out there that is both a challenge and an opportunity for us. It's a challenge because it's expensive to go in and retrofit existing buildings. It's much easier to do it on new buildings. So it's a kind of a waiting problem of waiting until the old buildings get knocked down. We said somewhat jokingly in our study on energy efficiency in Europe that the best energy efficiency tool would be a bulldozer. It was only partially a joke. I'll turn it back to you, Randy.
Okay. Gerard, you want to go next?
Sure. And, we've covered the benefits, more diversified portfolio, less exposure to fuel price volatility, less exposure to future carbon regulation. So there are a lot of benefits. Now, from my perspective, there are some challenges. The first is balance. It is true that renewable costs have been coming down. It's also true that they are still relatively expensive. On a one-for-one basis, they are not yet competitive. I mentioned earlier that 40 megawatts came through as part of our most cost-effective portfolio. That 40 megawatts does not in and of itself displace a specific unit. It's just that over the 20-year time period, given the initial cost, the lack of any carbon exposure, the fuel savings, it comes through on that basis. And so the first thing is cost. The other thing that I would say is a challenge really is how you balance the needs of the DG installations with how they use the grid. If you look at today where storage still is not viable, even most DG customers rely on the grid and they use the grid. One of the challenges going forward really is how they should pay for their use of the grid and what are the benefits they bring to the grid. I don't have a solution for that today, but I think that going forward as we continue to see DG penetration increase, I think that's something that we have to take up in a serious way. And the other thing is, Randy talked a little bit earlier about the RPS, how 20% may not be sufficient. We should be striving for 100%. I am all for renewable energy. The tension there is the cost versus the benefits. And I guess the other thing I would say is as renewable energy becomes more mainstream, what we really are going to have to look at and what's going to be increasingly important is looking at the relative cost of the different renewable energy types so that we are adding renewable energy, we are recognizing and balancing the cost to all of our customers from adding that energy. Now, in terms of energy efficiency, Doug talked about the issues that we see sometimes with the politician and the regulators. PNM has been very successful in our energy efficiency program. One thing I will tell you is that I am never eager to bring an energy efficiency application in front of the Commission, because even though I agree it's a no-brainer, I absolutely do not dispute that it's cost-effective over the long term, because it absolutely is. I've testified to that in probably 4 cases. But the rhetoric around it really gets overblown. And PNM has been able to get approval for most of the programs that we've approved. But the Efficient Use of Energy Act requires that, requires that a utility should be able to earn an incentive on our energy efficiency programs. That has been tough for any utility to really get through the Commission. The other thing that is in the Efficient Use of Energy Act requires the Commission to address the disincentives associated with the utility offering an energy efficiency program. And I'm not going to bore you with all of our finances, but that disincentive arises because if you look at the rate design for PNM and almost any other utility, we recover a lot of our fixed costs, the cost of our wires, through variable charges. So when someone saves a kilowatt hour of energy, they save 10 cents for that kilowatt hour of energy. But the fact is that PNM is only avoiding about 2.5 cents for that. And so as a result, we under-earn on our assets and we don't fully recover our assets. But those assets are critical to serve all of our customers. Whether you're a DG customer, whether you are a very efficient customer, you rely on the grid. And so if it's going to be sustainable, financially, it has to work for all of the players. The other thing I would say is compliance with the renewable energy portfolio can be a little bit challenging at times. You know, early in the life of the RPS, PNM took a lot of heat because we were buying a lot of RECs. And we were buying RECs not because that was our long-term strategy, but we were trying to enter into these 1- and 2-year REC deals so that we could create headroom under the RCT that Randy mentioned earlier to invest in assets. Frankly, that strategy has worked. As I mentioned, we've installed 70 megawatts of solar. We're on track to install more. We've invested over $200 million. The costs have come down. In 2015, we will be taking the output of 300 megawatts worth of wind farm capacity. And so it has worked. And I am also happy to say that PNM is on track to achieve the 20% RPS by 2020. And we've been able to do so within the RCT. But there are challenges, and part of those challenges are coming up with the correct resource mix, with balancing the different types of resources that are available, and trying to come up with a portfolio that is fully compliant, is adding real resources to the grid, and also balancing the cost to all of our other customers. As Doug also mentioned, there has been some back and forth at the Commission in terms of diversity, the RCT calculation, all of those things. And I'm not faulting the Commission here. I understand where they're coming from. But whether you're talking about renewable energy, whether you're talking about energy efficiency, frankly, whether you're talking about investment in automated meters or smart grid or anything else, if you're talking about reliability, what utilities really need is certainty. You know, a few years ago when we were just embarking down this road of distributed generation, part of what we heard from the DG contracting community is we can live with lots of different rules around REC payments, but what we need is certainty because we need to build our business model around that. Frankly, utilities also need that, and when you have a lot of disruption and a changing landscape in the regulatory world or in the legislative world, it can be very difficult for us. Now, the last thing I will say, and I do not want to overblow this because I think it has been overblown in some cases, Currently PNM has 70 megawatts of solar. We're integrating 300 megawatts of wind into our system. And, one of the things that is great and fascinating about electricity is that every instant, the amount of energy that we produce and deliver has to be the amount of energy that our customers are using. And I'm not talking about every 30 seconds. I'm talking about at every single instant. And pretty much since we started delivering energy, we've had to deal with load that is low in the middle of the night. It comes up during the morning. It usually peaks in the afternoon, and it goes down. And so PNM has always had to adjust our generation for that. With wind energy, with renewable with wind and solar energy particularly, that adds additional variability. PNM's been able to manage it, but the other thing to keep in mind, and Doug alluded to this earlier, New Mexico has a lot of renewable resources, and it would be fantastic if we could actually export some of that renewable energy to California or to larger markets. It's really tough, and it's really tough for a variety of reasons. The first reason is those other states don't want to import renewable energy. They want to grow their own. That's a big barrier. The other thing is, to get to California, which is a very, very deep market, you have to cross Arizona or some other state. Those states are not that crazy about having transmission lines built to deliver energy from one state to another. So that's also an issue. The third thing that I would say is kind of difficult is, if you look at the grid, PNM system is only about a 2,000 megawatt system. And so to the extent that we ever add a lot of renewable energy to try and to deliver to other states, integrating that, regulating that, making sure that the amount of energy that's produced and the amount that's consumed is going to be a challenge. We've been able to manage it thus far, but if you ever talk about adding 2,000, at one point we had 10,000 megawatts of wind farm capacity in our queue. It's since dropped out because they couldn't land contracts to offtake that power. That would be a big challenge operationally for PNM to absorb, to regulate, and the question at that point would be, who should pay for it? Should the wholesale customers pay for it, or do you try and pass those costs on to New Mexico residents?
Thanks, Gerard. Randy, you want to add?
Thank you. I see one of the benefits that Gerard was talking about is absolutely true. Every year we were back at the table negotiating for the next year's renewable energy incentive program, and it was pretty stressful to run a business that way. And so, in the last year, PNM negotiated a longer-term period, so we had certainty. So just like PNM, we need certainty to run our business as well. And probably one of the most important things, I think, in our state that we did very early on, as compared to other states, is that we set up a REC payment, which is a pay-as-you-go incentive instead of a rebate, which is an upfront payment. In most other states in the union that had RPS programs had rebates, and there was a huge uptake, and then there would be they'd run out of funds quickly, and so there's this just start-stop situation. So they're paying the rebate is basically paying for all the RECs up front instead of paying for them as you go. So it's better for ratepayers. It's better for the consumers to actually get benefit based on a well-designed solar system installed properly that should last a long, long time. I think a couple of the challenges that I wanted to add to what's already been said. In the RPS, originally it stated that that the RPS was intended to provide economic growth and environmental benefits to the state and the community. And so far, in all of the cases that I've been involved in, The only attribute, environmental attribute that was discussed was a carbon tax, but it really didn't get into a final decision about the value of solar. So if you're comparing, Gerard said, hey, solar's still expensive, too expensive. Well, if you compare the environmental attributes of a coal plant and solar electricity, there's clearly a difference in the environment and to people's health that's not accounted for, and that's still not accounted for, and it's a very difficult thing to account for. And so to set the precedent of accounting for those important environmental considerations, it just isn't, it's not done, but it's the most important thing. I mean, we're in a community, we're people, we care about our health. So this is a very difficult thing, and it's not even been touched by the PRC because just no one else has touched it. There's a lot of analysis that's been done on the value of solar that's ascribed much more value to solar than has actually been given, but none of that is being recognized in any decision making that I've seen so far. And the last thing is that it's a little frustrating sometimes to go to a house and look and say, oh, that house has single pane windows, and you know what? At the end of the day, it's cheaper to do solar than to replace your windows because you get a tax credit, and you don't get anything for replacing your windows. And this doesn't make any sense to me.
Great. So I got one more general question, and I'm not going to ask each of you to respond unless you want to. Are there any innovative financing opportunities that we should be pursuing as relates to either energy efficiency or renewable energy? Anybody got anything
You're
on
just
that one?
throwing it open.
We're just throwing it open. Anybody got any of those?
I'll take a first
All right.
crack at it. There's a lot of things that could be done with financing. I think, Randy, you would agree that an average residential installation for rooftop solar would cost, what, 20, 25,000, something like that?
15 to 25, yeah.
15 to 25,000. That's a big lump of money to come up with for kind of the average homeowner. And so if there could be some kind of leasing program, if there could be some kind of loan program that would help to facilitate this, I think certainly it would open up the market. And I know that Randy and Regina have looked at this. They're continuing to look at that to see whether or not it makes sense to bring it into the state, whether we can put together some kind of a program. I can tell you this, though. It is fantastically complicated by the tax code, which fantastically complicates almost every aspect of life. But this being no exception, you have to have a particular type of tax appetite for these financing programs to make sense. And it's not easy to find them. It's not easy to find them in a state like New Mexico, where the market's inherently small, because the state is inherently small. In a state like New York or a state like California, there are more options available because you're dealing with, you're dealing with populations of 20 million, 30 million or so. And so the market is bigger and more accepting. So yeah, I think there are innovative financing here, opportunities here. The question is trying to make them attractive enough to spring to life here in New Mexico.
Thanks. Randy?
I'll take that one on. I'd like to start by saying there's already a very, very great financing package thanks to HomeWise. Mike Lofton, raise your hand back there. They offer 20-year loans at 4% in the city. And if you get a 20-year loan at 4%, solar works. It means that your loan payment is going to be less than if you paid your utility bill. So we've already arrived in terms of that. There are income limitations that are set on that. And I would know, Mike, would you say it's been pretty successful so far? About $5 million of loans, and part of it has been financed by the city of Santa Fe, so they've partially subsidized the loan. So this is an incredible program where the city government has joined with Mike and their nonprofit HomeWise to put together a very, very innovative solution, and we haven't seen anything like this anywhere else in the United States. So I think that the one potentially innovative way in which we could see solar in the future would be community solar, which would be where people who live in apartments, who live in homes that they rent, want to do something. They want to buy a panel, just like PNM's Blue Sky program. They want to do something right away, and Kit Carson did something like this. Anybody here from Taos? Yep. Okay. Yep. So they have a program up there where Kit Carson sold. You could buy a module, and then you would get some kind of offset to your bill. So this was a very innovative way to get more and more people involved in this, see the impact. What's amazing is that I think we've seen with our customers that when they start getting solar, they start looking at their bill every month. But they never did before. And so now they're sort of looking at it and saying, wow, why is it so high? Oh, it's the air conditioning. God, what could we do? So there's more awareness, which is part of that path to energy literacy that we need.
And obviously, PNM doesn't have a position or ideas about innovative financing for this, but I guess I would point out that through the REC payments and through the net metering benefit that customers see, I think we're largely financing a lot of it today. But having said that, PNM I'll talk a little bit about energy efficiency, because we have provided a lot of rebates. We have helped people save a lot of energy. And one of the things that Randy said earlier that's absolutely true, Americans are not particularly energy conscious. We're just not. And a lot of that could be driven by the fact that we are bombarded daily with so much information. A lot of it can probably be attributed to the fact that energy prices here are relatively low. That's certainly the case in New Mexico compared to some other states. And so it is hard to get customers' attention on energy efficiency. And without energy efficiency programs, many of them just simply wouldn't consider it. The other thing that Randy said that I think is absolutely true has to do with building codes. The way that the energy efficiency programs that will be most effective and will really take hold, I think, will be when customers don't have to think about it, things that are automatic. And one of the best opportunities there is stronger building codes. What Doug said about existing building stock is absolutely the case. And so I guess what I would say is, from PNM's perspective, we don't have a position on financing arrangements. As long as they're fair. We don't want our customers obviously to be taken advantage of. But from our point of view, we're doing what we can to properly incent the market, whether it be energy efficiency or renewable energy.
Great. Thank you. For those of you, I can really relate to a lot of the things they're saying here. I had the fortune of living in Hawaii for 4 years, but also had the misfortune of paying $5 a gallon for gasoline and 43 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity. And it ranged from 20 cents one month to 40 the next, back to 30 to 40. It was not consistent. And so, I learned energy efficiency literacy very quickly living in that environment. I want to move now to asking, opening up the floor to some questions from the audience. I just want to let everybody know we are live streaming, so we will repeat the question for you. So we'll start here with the gentleman in the front row.
I'd have to disagree with the P&M spokesman about people not thinking about their energy bill. Every time they open up that bill, especially people on fixed incomes, they cry about their bill. And I would like to remember the panel to answer this question. I read in the papers P&M is top-heavy, the CEO doesn't even live in New Mexico, making boo-boos of bucks. Why can't they lower her paycheck? You know, people are suffering, they're hurting. Money is tight. And kilowatt hours go up and up, and I've never seen my bill go down, ever. And you're saying that people are not conscious about their bill? That's ridiculous. People are very conscious. I would like to see the CEO lower her paycheck.
I'm not sure what the question was, how to phrase it, but I guess the concern is that P&M and other utilities may be top-heavy in payments. Any comments you want to make on that?
Sure. Thanks. And let me clarify. I didn't say that customers don't care about their energy bill. That's absolutely not the case. They do care about their energy bill. What I said is that they're not energy conscious. And it really goes back to what Randy said. Customers are really not aware of how they spend, of how they use energy and how much they use. That was really my point. It really had nothing to do with the bill. The other point that I will address has to do with our rates. And it's true, we have had several rate increases in the last several years. That's true. It's also true, though, that if you look at our rates for probably the prior 20 years, they were going down. That's true. Now, bills were going up. The reason bills were going up, and this kind of gets back to how energy conscious we are, rates were going down, bills were going up because customers were using more energy. Why were they using more energy? Well, they were buying new TVs. They had set-top boxes for cable. They had set-top boxes for DirecTV. They have PCs. They have tablets. They have all kinds of new devices. And so, in fact, over much of the last 25 years, rates have gone down, bills have gone up. Now the other point I will make, and P&M is seeing this, and it's also manifesting itself across the industry. Energy consumption is starting to decline. P&M is seeing our residential use per customer begin to go down. And I think some of that is related to our energy efficiency programs. I think some of that is undoubtedly related to the recession that hit America around 2007, 2008. And New Mexico is certainly not coming out of it yet. And so use per customer is starting to turn around a little bit. It's starting to level off or decline. Your last point, though, about executive compensation, I guess there's a couple points I would make about that. The first thing is, and I'm certainly not going to debate whether our senior executives make too much money or not. I will tell you that we have to pay market rates for that. But the point that I would make about it is if you look at their salaries, considerably less than half of their rates of their salaries are actually in rates. And so if you look at it, it's probably 20 or 30% of their salaries are in electric rates. And that's simply a fact.
Other questions? Matt?
Can I, Randy, before you go
Yeah,
on,
no,
can I kind of give maybe a former regulator's point of view of the issues that you brought up? Because regulators and utilities, I think, find themselves in a no-win situation. It's a, heads I win, tails you lose sort of situation they find themselves in here. If you're one of the very vocal renewable energy or energy efficiency advocacies in the United States and in New Mexico, if you're associated with one of them, You believe that electric rates are not nearly high enough and should be considerably higher than they are now. That's a little bit self-serving, because if electric rates were higher, then people would pay more attention and be more energy efficient. It would also make it easier for renewable energy to be cost-effective against higher electric rates. When you're a regulator, you're not supposed to allow those kinds of considerations to come into your decisions about rates. You're supposed to look at what are the costs, what are the valid, legitimate costs that have made it through 9 to 12 months of testimony and examination and discussion. What are the valid costs that the utility's incurring? What's an appropriate profit for the utility to be making? And you put that all together and you do the arithmetic and you come up with rates at the end of the day. It's not my job to defend P&M. That's his job. He can defend P&M. But I will tell you this, of 25 electric suppliers in the state of New Mexico, which includes the cooperatives, there are 19 of them. There are 3 municipal electric utilities, and there are 3 investor-owned electric utilities that serve customers here. So 25 in total. P&M is smack dab in the middle. Okay, they're number 25. Number 13 or 12 or something like that. And it might come as a surprise to some people that there are some electric cooperatives out there that are not just more expensive than our investor-owned utilities, they are dramatically more expensive than our investor-owned utilities. So I give you that fact just to provide some perspective to this. I think regulators and legislators alike try to be sensitive to the issues that you brought up. There's a lot of people in New Mexico that are on a fixed income. I mean, that's a fact. And it can be a scary place to be. On the other hand, we have to look at, well, what are the costs? I mean, did P&M or El Paso Electric or Southwest Public Service, did they actually spend this money in good faith and at the direction of some government agency? And if the answer is yes, you can't sit there and say, you have to spend that money, but we're going to stick it to you. It's a delicate balance, and it's you almost never win at it. You never get a thank you for what is a pretty difficult job. I can guarantee you.
Thanks. All right. Matt?
Okay, so you mentioned Japan, you mentioned Europe, their cost for energy is 2.5 times is here. Seems like policies kind of set up a cheap energy situation here in America versus Europe, where they set it up where it's going to be 3 times more, and therefore renewable projects look that much better because they pay back that much faster on savings. You were speaking to that a moment ago. Can you go into more detail on differences and policies and how they help the investors and the smaller people that are paying that are at the rates too high?
Yes, so for the benefit of those listening via streaming, the question is to talk about the policies and the rate structure, compared especially to Europe and other places where policies may increase the cost of energy and therefore provide some more incentive for renewables.
I'll start it off, but I'd certainly like to hear Randy and Gerard kick in on this one as well, get their perspective. Part of my career I spent, as I said, leading a consulting group whose major business was in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. And so I got an opportunity to kind of look into the way utilities work there in pretty deep detail. The differences between the way utilities work here in the U.S. and the way the utilities work in almost every other part of the world are so complex, and there are so many differences that it would be difficult to digest it into a 30-second soundbite. So I'm not going to try and do that, other than to say it really is almost a completely different business model. That started with the fact that most utilities outside of the United States started out being instrumentalities of the government. They were basically government agencies, and that's not how the industry evolved here in the United States, quite differently. So there are a lot of differences between the two, but there's a lot of tax differences, and there's just a lot of territorial differences. The United States has always been rich in coal. Coal was the fuel of choice for electric power for well over 50 years. And it was cheap, and it kept prices cheap. And once customers got cheap electricity and got used to cheap electricity, raising the prices 3, 4, 5 times wasn't going to work. Second issue I would bring up is this. In the United States, with respect to natural gas, and I know that that's a sensitive subject, but we're going to talk about it at some point, so we might as well do it now. With respect to natural gas, the United States is unique in the world in the sense that we have an organized, open, competitive market for natural gas. They don't have this in Europe. They don't have it in Asia. They don't have it in South America. In those countries, natural gas, which is used quite plentifully, natural gas is sold as a proxy for oil. So it's priced off of oil prices. And if you know what oil prices are right now, you know it's very expensive. In the United States, we have a completely separate market for natural gas. And because of the tremendous increase in production of natural gas due to the shale gas formation and the ability now to drill for those deposits of gas at very, very low prices, our price for natural gas is about 4 to 5 times less than what you would pay in Europe or in Asia. That has a direct impact on electric prices because very quickly natural gas now has become the fuel of choice. It's displaced coal, and it is displacing coal as we talk. One of the reasons, perhaps the main reason, that so many coal plants are closing down across the United States is not really because of environmental regulation. It's because gas prices have made those plants uneconomic to run. And projections for these low gas prices remains out into the future. And, there you have it. So I know that natural gas prices are a sensitive subject, particularly when we're talking about environmental, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. It's a divisive issue. People are either for it or against it, and there's not much middle ground. I like to take the middle ground on this one and say, look, it has flowed back into our pockets billions of dollars that we would have had to pay out at the time of the worst recession in the last 50 years. So there's a benefit there. There is a bona fide benefit that has worked to keep electric prices low. Do we need better environmental rules around it? You bet. And I would urge anybody from Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department who happens to be in this room or listening over the web that it's time for New Mexico to join that bandwagon. So I'll turn it back to you, Randy.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment on that issue? Randy?
Well, my experience in Japan, in that situation, I honestly was energy illiterate when I got there because I was energy illiterate. And when I compared my bill to my brother's when I went home one day, and I was shocked to realize that his 1 month was equal to my 1 year, I woke up and realized, oh my gosh, I got to figure out what's going on here. And that's the advantage that Japan or any country that has no resources has is they had to import everything. And so they had to design the economic system around efficiency. They had to, and they did. And in our culture, in our metropolis and sprawl, we have designed our systems inherently to be inefficient. And they're very, very inefficient. They're very wasteful. If you look at the economics of moving a car, that only gets 20% efficiency, or a power plant that only converts 30% of the efficiency, it's awful. When you go look at heating water, which is you only need 120 degrees, with a power plant, if you use electricity, that's 30% efficient. I mean, it just makes no sense. If you were a physicist and looking at the second law of thermodynamics, you just wouldn't do this. You wouldn't design economy this way. So the one thing that Japan is in real chaos on right now is they've closed all their nuclear plants because of Fukushima Daiichi, and they're trying to reopen them again, and it's a real disaster, economic and energy disaster there. And so they've ramped up quickly, and now they are in 1 year, they are the biggest solar market in the world. That's how incredible it is to see the capability and the speed at which you can deploy renewable resources there's no challenger to that. It takes years to build a power plant, a gas plant, a coal plant, a decade or more for a nuclear plant, and we can do it in a year. That's the difference. And so they are doing it, and they're doing it in a big way, and they're also looking at storage. They have incentives for storage, and they do have hydrogen cell that will convert gas to back and forth to electricity. So it's a good case study about something that has dramatically happened in their economy, and they have to address it. So I'm sure a lot of lessons learned that will benefit from coming out of Japan.
Great, thank you. The question over here.
When they were talking about energy literacy and homeowners in particular, I'm wondering if there's any answer to cracking this energy efficiency problem. And you mentioned, Randy, that people buy the PV system and then they become energy conscious. That's backwards. Is there some way to crack this nut that any of you can suggest?
So the question relates to the energy illiteracy and any way to crack the nut of people becoming more aware at this point in time. Any comments on that?
I think part of it is education, but it has to be sustained. So, for instance, PNM is launching a home energy audit program, and we're hoping the customers take advantage of it. It will make them aware of opportunities. They have to pay $40 for the audit. They get a CFL, they get a low flow shower head, and some other things. But we'll identify opportunities to help them save money. So that's one thing. But there is another program that we're launching that Randy's comments reminded me of. And that is, it's a program that we've hired O-Power to do. And what we're doing is we're looking at customers who use more energy than average. And we are going to try and enroll them in this program. And what we're going to do is we're going to send them information about how their consumption compares to their neighbors, to other customers, to let them know that it's higher than most, and to give them practical advice on how they might be able to change their behavior to use less energy, because there's a good chance that they're not aware that they are using more energy than the typical customer. So that's one way to do it. You know, these programs have been tried in other states. They have been successful. I guess a question that I have, and what I'm hoping to learn through this, is how sustainable is it? So what the research has shown in other states is as long as they're getting this periodic mailing, they do curb their energy use. I guess what I'm wondering is, when they stop getting that information, will they revert back to their previous consumption, or will they have learned enough that it will become part of their lifestyle? But I think education has to be a big part of it, because if it's not education, there's going to have to be some sort of economic signal that will register with them.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, actually, Gerard. That's awesome to see a bill and compare it to your neighbors. Actually, my aunt in Michigan has that. She was mailing me her bills. She is not. She's way above average, unfortunately. So the cracking this, I've heard of other states also having more time of use energy information. If we did have more time of use charges for when we use the energy, and if we knew what those charges are, we might become more mindful and actually even smart about shifting our loads. Like, let's not do the laundry now, let's do it in the evening when it's cheaper. Just the mindfulness of that, and that could happen with time of use. Time of use is very important in like California, where the rates, are really much higher, and they're much more critical peaks. So that would be another step to take. It would be a forced step, but it also could be a step that could help people by allowing them to shift their loads to cheaper times of the day. So that would be another investment in the education. And I don't know if you looked into that, Gerard, to see how that would help, but that would be a valuable way to give feedback to a customer.
And we actually do have time of use customers. All of our non-residential customers pretty much are on time of use rates. We have a residential time of use rate that very few customers actually take service under. And in part, what we've seen is, frankly, they don't want to think about it. And so it kind of gets back to, how do you engage them? How do you make them more energy conscious or more energy literate?
So I think both Randy and Gerard have hit on the issue here, which is how do you make people care about this? And if your electric bill is, let's say, $100 a month, and somebody like Gerard comes along and says, you can save 10%, by doing this, and they say, well, okay, that's maybe $10 a month. Many, maybe even most people are going to say, I'm not going to turn my life upside down for $10 a month. So that brings up the immediate solution. If you really want an instant solution to this, raise prices by 300%. That'll get people's attention really darn fast. It's not a politically possible solution, though. So, where I think energy efficiency has gotten its greatest gains, and let's put some facts on the table, though. It's not that energy efficiency has been a failure. I would reject that hypothesis altogether. Energy efficiency has made incredible changes in the electric profile of the United States. And there's graphic after graphic that you can access on the EIA website that shows just what has happened to energy intensity, the way things have progressed over the last 4 decades. And in fact, you can see the point at which it happened was 1982, the Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act, which made many aspects of energy efficiency mandatory. And that's when it all started turning around. And it's that mandatory aspect. It's when, in my opinion, the government got involved and started saying, all right, we're going to have minimum efficiency standards for refrigerators. We're going to have minimum efficiency standards for light bulbs. I wasn't kidding. Try and find an incandescent bulb now at Lowe's. It's a politically divisive point of view because there are a lot of people, and not to make this a partisan discussion, but there is an entire political party that says, this is a government overreach. But it has done a tremendous amount of good, and it has saved a tremendous amount of money for the United States. So I guess my point of view is that as long as we can continue to push the bar that way, I'm less concerned about increasing energy literacy.
I want to add one comment as the moderator to that. And one of the things that seems to be working well is working with school kids. We're teaching school kids about energy efficiency and recycling, and they're going home and hounding their parents, and that's making a change one step at a time. Let's go over here.
So personally, as a P&M customer, not much of one because I don't have an electric bill, but is when I go to different events, I see the people representing P&M as energy illiterate. I can't have a conversation with them about your programs and what's happening because you don't educate them and send them out in the street educated. You take the most illiterate people and put them on the street, and those are the people I interact with. And when we set up, when you talk about the fact that we have this rent credit and we have energy efficiency programs, they're far too little. We need to do way more. Cities and many cities around the country are doing way more than us. Look at the city of Boulder, look at many cities in California. They're doing way more than us. And I understand it's because you have an investor-owned utility that's all about profits as opposed to their customers. That's what we see as customers. We want to be energy literate. It's one of the things that I do is try to make people energy literate. I can't do it by myself, but P&M can do a lot. We have this rent credit. I have 13 cents a kilowatt hour. All we have now is 4 cents a kilowatt hour. And P&M on the street makes people think that that's a big deal. It's not. It's not enough. Even 13 cents isn't enough. We should do more. Mine ends in 2018. What happens after that? I'd really like to know. That's one of my questions. Well, if we want a sustainable program, we need to think sustainably. We need to think long-term. I don't know if that can happen with an investor-owned utility or not. But I believe it's far too little for us. We need to do way more. And I would like to see a different attitude towards energy efficiency, especially, and renewable energy. I personally think you should never put in a renewable energy system without doing energy efficiency first. It's crazy, but people do it all the time. We need to change that attitude. So I believe, and also I see P&M wanting to put a rate rider every time we have energy efficiency because they want to recover those costs. We should be paying people because they're doing energy efficiency, just like the rec credits. We should be paying people to do that. You would have far less plants that you would need if we had more renewable energy. And so I think, and what I also see is P&M wants to put generation on their side of the meter as opposed to the customer side of the meter. Why is that? The model is changing much more towards the investors. Let's help the customer. Why is it that it's so difficult to help the customer? It can't be all of the onus can be on us. There has to be some help out there.
Let me see if I can translate that maybe into 3 questions. One of is, what is P&M doing, or what can they do more of in helping address the energy illiteracy issue? Another one would be, what happens to rec payments after the first agreement is over? And the third one would be, if you could address the issue about P&M looking more at renewables behind the grid, I forget how you worded that, as opposed on the customer end.
Sure. I appreciate your concerns. I will tell you that while I recognize that you believe it's insufficient, P&M has been very, very active on both the energy efficiency and the renewable energy fronts. And I'm not going to get into a debate, but let me give you some facts. P&M entered into a PPA that allowed the first significant renewable facility to be built in New Mexico before there was an RPS. That was a 200 megawatt wind farm near House, New Mexico. We were one of the supporters of the renewable portfolio standard legislation. We were one of the supporters for the energy efficiency legislation. We were the first utility that came forward with an energy efficiency application. And we have probably spent between $60 and $100 million on energy efficiency. In terms of rec payments, P&M really on our own was the first utility in New Mexico to propose rec payments. That program came completely from P&M. Now, are we doing enough? For some people, we are never doing enough. But I guess the other thing I would say is part of my job is balance. And if you look at where the positions P&M has taken on renewable energy and energy efficiency, we have been more supportive than adversarial in terms of those issues. But we also have to recognize the balance. At the end of the day, our customers have to pay for it. And as Doug mentioned earlier, no one really wins in rate cases. A big portion of my job when we file a rate case is to ensure a successful outcome for the rate case. I will tell you, I never want to file a rate case because they are so contentious, they are so controversial, and they are so uncertain. The other thing that I would challenge is the idea that as an IOU, PNM doesn't care about it. As Doug pointed out just a few minutes ago, if you look at electric rates in New Mexico, our rates are considerably lower than a lot of the public power entities. Now, in terms of the REC payments, I can't tell you where they're going to go post-2018. I can tell you that, I guess it was 2 years ago, Randy, every year we were arguing in our renewable procurement plans about the value of the REC payments. Solar prices had come down, so we actually reached out to the DG community and said, you know what, we would like to come up with a DG component in our renewable portfolio plan that is sustainable so that we don't have to talk about this every year. It will provide some certainty to the contractors in terms of your business model. It will provide some certainty to PNM in terms of the amount of our renewable budget that we have to devote to REC payments. And we were able to come up with a 4-year trajectory for that. So it is declining. Now, the third thing I will address has to do with where we install renewable resources, whether it's on the grid somewhere or it's behind customers' meters. What drives that, and what will drive it going forward, frankly, is relative cost. If you look at the energy that comes from a utility scale solar facility, on a levelized cost basis, it's about 7 cents, and that includes the REC payment. If you look at the DG facilities that's installed behind the meter, you know what, I'm very proud of the success our REC purchase program has had. I'm glad you participate in it. But if you look at the relative cost, we're looking at 7 cents per kWh on our side of the meter. And we have a higher capacity factor. We usually have a higher contribution of capacity at peak. And I'm not faulting the contractors. The reason we can do that is we get a big site, we can prepare it, and we can orient it perfectly. We don't have to deal with trees, we don't have to deal with parapets, we don't have to deal with house orientation. But if you look at DG energy, and I appreciate that it's a very good deal for the homeowner, they're getting a credit of about 10 cents per kWh. If they're getting a REC payment today of 4 cents, that energy is costing PNM basically 14 cents per kWh compared to the 7 cent levelized cost on the utility side. That's why it's more economic for us to do that. It's not because we hate DG, it's not because we love it on the utility side. It all comes down to the balance of the benefit of the renewable energy versus the cost. We have a responsibility to all of our customers to ensure that we are coming up with the most robust and lowest reasonable cost solution. But I appreciate your comments.
Can I, Randy, can
Yes.
I just take 1 minute
We have about 2
to
minutes.
add kind of a regulatory perspective on the question that you brought up? Because, you know, you hear that a lot. PNM's dragging its feet. It's not doing things enough. Other cities are ahead of us. And it's true in many cases that there are a number of other cities that are ahead of us. The problem, though, is that much of this is specified in law. All right, so the efficient use of energy law says, here's how much energy efficiency the utilities have to do. The RPS, the renewable energy law, says, here's how much renewable energy you have to do. It doesn't say that you can't do more, but as Gerard alluded to, when you go into a rate case, there's a number of parties who want P&M or SPS or EP. They want them to do more. There's an equal number of parties on the other side who are making sure they don't go 1 millimeter past what the law says. And so the way the commission has to ultimately rule is, here's what the law says, you complied with the law, end of case. So, you know, if you really truly believe that we're not doing enough here, it's Brian Egolf you need to be talking to.
Great, thank you.
The legislature can change it.
Well, we're about out of time here. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. We can always use coffee mug. Thank you so much. I want to thank the members of the panel today, Randy Sadewick from Positive Energy, Doug Howe, especially for stepping in at the last second here, and Gerard Ortiz for representing PNM. We appreciate it. I'm sure people will hang around a little bit if you have other questions, but thank you, and let's show a little round of appreciation for them.